Well, thank you, Chairman. I'm glad to be back in the room with my colleagues I served with in the House, and many of them on the House Intelligence Committee. For my comments for the record, Director Clapper and Director Petraeus, I'm going to say that I think that there's been real progress that is, to me at least, appeared in the last year to be significant in terms of coordinating the intelligence community. I will say that I wondered a number of times over the handful of years between the time we created the DNI and you're taking this position a year ago, whether this was a system that was ever going to work or not. But it does seem to me that after lots of effort, it's come together. And I listened carefully to Chairman Rogers' questions and comments about how we can make that happen in even more significant ways. Certainly the coordination at Abbottabad shows what can happen when the intelligence community and the Defense Department work together. The efforts of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which has a big presence in Missouri, and the CIA and Special Forces have worked together. And my hope is that now this community is becoming what we all hoped it would become whenever the DNI's job was created. One of the things I want to ask about, and I think I'll ask and have an answer on this later of you, Director Clapper, is one of the things that the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Act did was allow the DNI procurement authority for all enterprise architecture of IT.
Right. Okay.
And I think that's a fairly complicated issue, but it's one I'm very interested in, what you're thinking there. And if you can maybe briefly respond to that, and then in more detail later, are we looking at a unified location somewhere that would be a backup location outside of Washington? I know that was on the in the process for a long time, but seems to be waning right now. And just a quick answer there, and then I have one or two other questions.
Well, Senator Blair, thank you very much, and I appreciate the mention of NGA. I had the honor of serving as its director for almost 5 years, and I do want to recognize the fact that even with the new campus here about to open up almost completely in the next couple of weeks, very important contingent remains in 2 locations in Missouri. As we approach, I'll just say a word on IT. As we approach the inevitability of budget cuts in the intelligence community, I think this is the area of greatest potential for efficiencies and reduction in the amount of the funding we now spend on IT. And so we are very deeply engaged in an approach to a more unitary architecture across the intelligence community. And frankly, it's something we've talked about as their nirvana for years. But now that we're running out of money, so we must begin to think mode. I think that is serving as the stimulus, if you will, to do some more creative thinking. And I think this would do wonders in terms of saving money, efficiency, and promoting integration.
Well, I do too. And let's just go to that topic then, since you brought it up. Since we are talking about budget cuts everywhere, I'd like you and Director Petraeus both to quickly discuss how that's going to impact you and how you'd prioritize those things. And maybe you just gave part of the answer, Mr. Clapper, on trying to do things that produce a better result with less money. But some of the things we do, we can't do with less money, and I'd be pleased for both of you to respond to that topic.
Well, let me start, and then I'm sure Director Petraeus will have some commentary too. I was around in the early 90s. I served as director of the Defense Intelligence Agency then, when we were impelled to reap the peace dividend. And so that caused us to go on a 7-year downslope in intelligence resources. And of course, which came to a screeching halt on 9/11, and then we went on a sudden upslope. So now we're in another cycle of reduction. First comment I would make, and this gets to the why a DNI. In the last 10 years, whether it was a DCI or the DNI, all we had to do essentially was preside over handing out more money and more people every year. And that 10-year period basically encompassed the entire existence of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Now we're in a different mode, and I view this as a litmus test for this office to preside over these inevitable cuts that we're going to have to make, but profit from the experience of the early 90s and not do some of the things we did then. Everything we do in intelligence, first of all, is not of equal merit. Some things are more valuable than others, particularly as we look to the future. I think it's very important to try to protect that most valuable resource we have, which is our people. We must continue some way of hiring every year, which we didn't do in many cases during that 7-year hiatus period. We must try to sustain healthy R&D for the future. And I think we have to be rather cold-hearted and objective about the real contribution that various systems make. So that's kind of the approach we're going to take. I have engaged with the program managers and functional managers because this has to be a corporate thing, which certainly will lead. But I am reasonably confident that we can come through this without a great deal of harm. But you make a good point, sir, and I don't want anyone to be under the mistaken impression that we are going to sustain all the capabilities we have today, because we're not.
General, if you could very briefly, I don't want to take too much time, but I'd love to hear from you. And like everybody else, I'm pleased to see you here today and in this job.
Well, thanks very much, Senator. First, just to pile on, if you will, about your comment about coordination. The coordination is better within the agency itself, between the operators and the analysts, for example. It is better within the greater intelligence community. It is better within government writ large, with the military and law enforcement agencies. And I think, frankly, that there is even a better approach in terms of sharing and supporting your efforts to provide the oversight that is also an important function as well in all of this. With respect to the budget cuts, the key is protecting core capabilities. In the Central Intelligence Agency, we're working very hard to stay absolutely riveted on the counterterrorist fight, but also to balance that and not lose sight of the global coverage mission. We've been able to reestablish a number of the different stations and bases in that global coverage mission, and we're going to have to evaluate very carefully the future in that regard. We have, as the Director mentioned, had 10 years of steady increases. Now we're going to have to tighten our belts. There are areas that we have identified in which we think we can achieve some efficiencies, some savings, and so forth. But as the DNI said, we cannot return to the kind of period that we had during the peace dividend days where we weren't hiring or were cutting. We have to protect our most important resource, our people. We need to continue to hire throughout this time as well, so that there's a continued addition to the workforce, and the youth has continued to be brought in as it has been over the past 10 years. And we've got to continue to invest and make our work meaningful and important so that the best and brightest not only seek to join the agency, but also to stay with it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Senator.